Hello, this is Coach Wilson, and this is Unit 8, Day 5. Today's journal, what are some areas of concern in the United States during the early 20th century? Now, I want you to think back to Unit 7 and Unit 8, and think about some things that we've talked about that may come back to light as far as political issues, issues between various groups of people, what's going on with immigrants, things of that nature. So today we're going to be discussing a little bit about imperialism. And we're not going to spend just a ton of time on this, but we're going to try to get through a little bit to make sure you understand what's going on with America and some of our imperialistic practices of the late 1800s and early 1900s. Now, in the United States in the late 1800s, there was quite a bit of growth from a population standpoint. The U.S. could not consume food or goods fast enough, and because of this, we were having these very harmful cycles of financial panic over the course of a couple years. We think back to the Panic of 1893, and then the country kind of recovers, and then we're going to have a few more kind of economic crises going into the 1920s. But the big problem here is that farmers and industrialists both agree that in order for the United States to continue to improve economically, we had to expand into new markets, specifically into global markets where we could put our footprint. Now, how does our country expand? How do we get more, places to sell things? Well, one of those practices is imperialism. And what imperialism is a nation tries to create an empire by dominating the weaker nations around it. And the way that they do that is by doing it either economically, politically, or militarily. And this practice is called expansionism. And expansionism is going to be very important to the United States growth over the course of the next 40 to 50 years, especially once we get past World War II. You're going to see our involvement politically and economically and militarily, for that matter, in the rest of the world grow exponentially. The other way that we do this is through annexation, and this is adding territories that maybe weren't a part of the United States as either adding as a territory or, like in the case of Hawaii or Alaska, as a new state. Now, and just for the record, I want to go back and make one comment. If you've ever seen a building that says Annex, let's say it's called the Wilson Annex to this building that we're at Newton Conover. Well, in order to go to that building, that is the annex, which is an add-on to the new building. Does that make sense? So when you add on, it's annexed. But anyways, becoming an expansionist nation, there are obviously some really easy ones that we can think of. You think of Guam, and I think I actually had that map there. Guam, Hawaii, the Philippines, and the Philippines especially early in the 1900s we'll talk about. In 1867, our Secretary of State, William Seward, annexed the Midway Islands, and that's important if you think about trying to have an overseas trade market with China or with Japan or some of those Asian markets that we could have traded in. In 1875, we signed a treaty to try to trade with Hawaii, which at the time was an island nation. And we're going to talk about our influence there a little more as we continue. And then the U.S. had established solid trade with China and Japan during this time period in the building towards the 1900s. But now they were wanting control of more Pacific islands in order to use for their naval vessels to refuel and kind of have a place to stop. There are many voices that supported expansionism. Obviously, your industrialists such as Rockefeller, McCormick, Carnegie, pick a big name. All of them felt like they could become national corporations. We've also got some there that you may have heard of: Singer Sewing Machines, Kodak Camera, Sherwin-Williams Paint. All those were companies that were developing into the 1900s. Their idea was to invest directly into the other countries, and because of this, once you invest into those countries, because they're weaker economically, become dependent upon your business, and then you have more political control. Now, one of those businesses was Minor C. Keith's United Fruit Company. In 1913, around the early 1900s, he leases some land in Costa Rica along with some railroads, and he starts this fruit company, and while starting the company, provides these services to the government of Costa Rica. Well, as a result, by 1913, they are one of the biggest companies in that area, but they've also been able to gain control of not only Costa Rica, but Guatemala and Honduras as far as their political influence and their economic influence, therefore creating this new quote-unquote republic, which comes to be known as the Banana Republic. So the term Banana Republic actually originates from this business and what he did here. Now, in rebuilding the Navy, obviously, if we're going to expand economically from America to these other countries, we've got to have a strong Navy. And so there was a decision to move from the old ships that we had built during the Civil War and the wooden ships to a steel ship, which was replacing some of these rusting Civil War ships that had originally been built, out of metal, but not the steel that now we could easily make much faster. And so Carnegie Steel and U.S. Steel are going to help to rebuild the Navy and to reshape how our ships look. If you look at the right, you can see the USS Maine. Congress authorized the building of 9 warships, including the Maine, in the 1980s. More battleships, gunboats, and torpedoes both, and cruisers followed. One of the captains in the Navy during this time actually wrote a book entitled The Influence of Sea Power Upon History. And essentially what it said was that the economic future of our country depends on new markets. So in order for us to economically expand and to continue to function as a country, we had to expand into other places. The problem is we needed a powerful Navy in order to protect those markets. By 1900, the U.S. had one of those powerful navies in the world. Really second or kind of close to like Britain or some of those countries that have been powerful over the course of the last 100 years. Now, support across the nation was very important. Henry Cabot Lodge was one who promoted expansionism. He was a senator in Massachusetts, and he argued that the quest for empire might actually restore the pioneer spirit that once existed before the country really had been founded completely. So if you think early 1800s and how people really tried to go to new markets and things of that nature. Then you have this idea that we should support the doctrine of social Darwinism, and that the fittest survive and let those who are strong protect themselves, etc. Not a great philosophy in that regard, but progressive leaders promoted this idea that expansionism was inevitable, saying that the advanced civilizations produced by the Anglo-Saxon and Teutonic races were superior to the primitive societies that they conquered. Okay, and so really what that's talking about is the white races that conquered what is now the United States. They were superior to the primitive societies that existed here, the Native Americans. So that ends the notes for today. Make sure you answer these questions, just 3 today. Make sure you're keeping up with your notes, your journal, and your vocab. And then here's your vocab for the day. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, I'll talk to you soon.